Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the latest ICON webinar. It's a very topical one today. If you're anything like our firm, we're just in the midst of preparing for our performance-inspiring conversations, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Dalton Handley and Vicky Feros, directors at Dalton Handley, who are going to take us through their thoughts on preparing for performance review discussions in challenging times, such as the one we're going through at the moment. As always, there's the opportunity to ask lots of questions. Vicky and Charles will present for approximately 40 minutes, so I would ask if you have questions, please either use the chat box facility and send them through to me and I'll curate and ask at the end. Or if you've got some curly ones and you'd like to remain anonymous, just simply send me a private message and I'll forward those questions on to Charles and Vicky at the end accordingly as well. But I hope you all enjoy it. And over to you, Charles and Vicky. Thanks very much for taking the time out to join us today.
Thanks, Fraser. Appreciate that. Hello to all of you. Hope you're not getting webinar fatigue. We're hoping that this will provide you with some really solid insights and advice ahead of your performance reviews at what is a slightly unusual time. And it's a little bit different to typical years. And for those of you who don't know us, as a business, we specialise in recruiting BD, marketing and comms roles for professional services firms across Australia. And we've got a very strong alliance partnership with Andrew McGrath up in Asia, who's actually joining, who's on the call today. Personally, I've got 13 years recruiting in this sector, predominantly in Australia, but also in the UK. And Vicky, my fellow business partner, has worked in tier 1 and global law firms in senior BD roles and joined me around 4 years ago. And our colleague Lauren Jansen worked at Mintrellison before joining us as well. So that's a bit of background on the team. We hope you enjoy the interactive session and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. And we're going to run through a range of different topics today. So I will hand over to Vicky, who is going to run a quick poll. Essentially, we just want to get a feel for where everyone is currently. So where do you actually work at the moment?
Thanks, Charles. So yeah, I'll start that poll now for you all. So just get it loading. So we just want to get a feel for the audience today. So if you can just put in your vote as to where you are today: legal, accounting, engineering, other professional services, or other. So I'll give that a couple more seconds. One or two more seconds. All right, I will end that now. Thank you. So I suppose no surprise that most people are from legal, but definitely we have representation across accounting, engineering, and other as well. So thank you for posting those. So I will go into. Oh, I just lost the presentation. Oh, there we go. So I'll just go into the agenda now. So we're just going to, I'll just quickly run through what we're going to cover today. So Charles will kick off with the GFC learnings and recovery. So Charles worked during the GFC in Australia and the UK in recruitment, so he has some good learnings that he can share with you. I'll then talk about the current market trends and some of the approaches that firms are taking to COVID-19. We'll then look at approaching performance discussions. We'll go through a bit of a framework and some non-monetary incentives that you can be thinking of, as well as a practical action plan. We'll then finish up with some takeaway tips, and we do have some time at the end for Q&A. So please prepare your questions, as Fraser said earlier. So I'll just hand over to Charles now, who is going to run through the GFC and recovery learning.
Thanks, Vicky. So one of the things that we saw during the GFC in Australia was widespread recruitment freezes for about 6 months. There was very little in the Australian market for that period of time. And it was that was particularly pronounced in the big four accounting firms. And it was quite common to see that as being a sort of a top-down approach. So it wasn't BD directors and CMOs that were instigating that. It was more so, I say, a firm-wide approach. So blanket recruitment freeze, business critical roles weren't being recruited. And also, during that time, the economic slowdown was as a result of a major banking crisis, liquidity crisis. And therefore, there wasn't really an end in sight. We hadn't faced a downturn like that before. Australia was a little bit unscathed, but in the UK, it was a real shock to the system. And the government response was in Australia, and both in Australia and the UK, was really quite limited in comparison to the current situation. So essentially, we saw the recession was due to a banking crisis. It wasn't due to a government shutdown of economic activity that we're seeing this time to control the pandemic. It was a completely different recession. And also, a lot of the hiring freezes were, as I say, firm-wide, whereas we're currently seeing pauses on recruitment, which Vicky will talk about in a little bit more detail. But also, a really key takeaway point from this is that post-2001 and during that period of boom up until 2009, BD functions became so large. You had firms in Australia that would have 80, 90, 100 people. And those BD and marketing functions at the time were, they didn't add as much value as they do now. So you had more reactive, generalist marketing, BD, comms functions that were very overweight, very over-resourced, compared to now, where we have much leaner teams, and BD functions in the current climate are actually more proactive, more highly regarded by the partners, and therefore, and that's as a result, we're not seeing mass redundancies. Very, very few redundancies related to the current crisis, essentially, and because of the plan to actually get the country out of the COVID-19 crisis, obviously there are some, we don't have a crystal ball, but because of that economic plan, the swift and very large government stimulus that has come this time around compared to last time, we do anticipate that there will be a gradual upturn, probably from July, August, though, as I said, that is quite hard to predict. Some of the key learnings from the GFC and my time in London in the GFC and also in Australia during the subsequent upturn is that the value of BD is greater now. The regard that partners have for BD is greater and the teams are far leaner. That's absolutely crucial in terms of roles being less likely to be made redundant. Also, I actually think personally that the R word in Australia, and i.e. Australia's not been in a recession for sort of 30 years. I think actually if we sort of dissect Australia and look at the different economies within Australia, the East Coast has been in recession before. So I don't think that this is, the downturn is too new to Australia as such. And therefore I think that, law firms have learned from the downturn in 2009, the downturn during the European professional services firms, have learned from the downturn during the European sovereign debt crisis. And I think that as a result, the firms will be ready to, capitalise on the upturn that will come. And the upturn will always come. I've worked in recruitment for a long time, and during any downturn, there is always an upturn, which we are anticipating to, start gradually. Over the next few months, with a real uptick in activity probably from February. So I'll now hand over to Vicky, who's going to talk through some market trends in a little bit more detail and what we're seeing in today's landscape.
Thanks, Charles. Before we go into that, we do have a quick poll around the GFC. Just wanted to get a feel for who actually worked in BD marketing comms during the GFC. So just answer yes or no to that at the moment, just to get a feel for who did work in professional services during the GFC. Give that maybe a couple more seconds. All right, I'll end that now. Yeah, it's probably half-half, which is quite interesting. So, yeah, thanks everyone for voting. We'll go back into the presentation. Oh, sorry, Charles.
Of particular significance, I suppose, is that for those who didn't work during the GFC last time around, some of the advice that we can provide during this presentation will be particularly pertinent to your performance reviews, given that it might be quite daunting. You know, being unaware of what to expect and how to position yourself during these sorts of times. And I think it's very important to take away some of the key takeaway tips that we give you will be particularly important, because a different approach is definitely warranted during these times. But for those of you who worked during the GFC, there might be some familiarity when it comes to your salary reviews. But I'll pass back over to Vicky.
Thanks, Charles. All right, well, let's jump into the current market trends. These are some of the trends that we've seen, and we've been speaking with a lot of clients, a lot of candidates, just a lot of people in the market about what's going on. So I'll run through these quickly with you. As Charles mentioned, we are seeing minimal redundancies. We haven't actually seen any in legal that are COVID related. There have been a couple in maybe mid-tier accounting, but not anything that's widespread at all. This might change if there is a second wave of lockdowns, if things turn really bad, but from what we've been hearing, everything seems to be quite positive. Contractors, on the other hand, have been stood down, but contractors are maybe external consultants or people that might be on a 6-month contract that might not be renewed. That's understandable why those placements are being stood down. With Big Four, we haven't seen it yet, but Big Four tend to take any opportunity to restructure, as a lot of you are aware. We are expecting there to be some restructuring in the Big Four to come, particularly as many of them are very, very heavily reliant on their consulting and advisory practices. And those practices are a little bit quiet at the moment. So because of that, and because we have heard of some sort of senior leadership changes in some of the Big Four, we are expecting there to be some restructures, which may result in redundancies, it may not. It just depends on how they restructure. As Charles touched on before, recruitment processes are frozen or paused, but they haven't cancelled, which is a really good sign. It means that things are literally just stopping in their tracks. And we have spoken with a lot of clients who have said, we do need to hire this person, we do need to hire for these roles, but we just need to wait until the market picks up a little bit, until there is a little bit of certainty back in what the future looks like. So we are expecting those to come back. And in terms of where firms are hiring, though, business critical roles are still being hired. They may have been approved before COVID came into the market, or they could just be replacements of very, very critical roles that the business needs. So we are seeing those still being recruited. And there is obviously virtual onboarding and virtual resignations that are happening. So I know somebody who resigned last week, and a courier came to their house to pick up their work laptop. I know somebody who is starting a new role next week, and they're having a new laptop delivered to them, and they're doing all the onboarding virtually. So there is still the opportunity to start a new role in COVID, and it is happening at the moment. We have heard, and we've been speaking to quite a lot of people about where things are busy, and government is continuing to roll out projects, and actually a lot of projects are being brought forward, sometimes even 6 months earlier than what they had planned to be rolled out previously. I'm not sure if it's trying to bring projects into this financial year for this budget, but there are definitely projects that are being rolled out right across Australia. So that's very heavy in projects, infrastructure, energy, mining, resources. So we are seeing those teams be quite busy. In terms of other teams that are busy, particularly in legal, we're seeing obviously litigation, employment, insolvency and restructuring. There's also quite a flow of work still from the Royal Commission, so banking teams are busy. And there's obviously a lot of COVID-19 work as well out there, which is quite novel, which is also very interesting for teams at the moment. As soon as certainty picks up and things start to return to what everyone says is normal, we will expect that corporate M&A will definitely get busy as soon as there's distressed assets come to the market. Obviously, banking will be busy as financing requirements are needed. insolvency, restructuring, litigation will continue to be busy. So at the moment, most of our clients, most people that we've spoken to are very busy. There are a few teams that are quiet, but across the board, things seem to be quite positive. In terms of around the world, and as Charles alluded to, Andy, our relationship partner from Asia, is on the call, but we also have relationship partners in the UK and US through Andy's extension. So we have been chatting with them, and at the moment, the Asia region is coming back online. Definitely, it is ahead of Australia, and we are seeing that recruitment, people are coming back into the office. So things are starting to pick up definitely a lot more in Asia. In the UK and the USA, they're definitely weeks behind us. So we aren't expecting them to come online or to sort of come back up to pre-COVID levels for a little while. And if you are considering moving overseas or relocating overseas, we do encourage you to maybe think about that in 6 months' time, or just when the market recovers a little bit, because there is still quite a lot of uncertainty there. Final point is we actually are seeing a lot of people still really quite interested in looking for a new role, hearing about what's out there. There was a lot of interest before COVID in people looking for a new job, whether that be internally or externally, and that actually hasn't slowed down. People are a bit more cautious, yes, but people are happy to move for the right role. So that just implies to us that when the market does pick up, there will be quite a lot of activity, excuse me, and quite a lot of movement across the market. So just following on from that, we do have another quick poll on team sentiment. So I'll just run that now. It'll just be good to get an idea of what sentiment is in your team at the moment. We're seeing things being quite positive, but it'd be great just to hear from you as to what you're feeling. So I've just got that up now, so I'll let you all vote on that. Okay, give that a couple more seconds. So positive and unsure seem to be the most. I'll stop that now, and I'll share the results with everybody. So as you can see, mostly positive, obviously unsure, which makes sense as well, but a little bit negative, but not too much. And to be honest, that's echoing what we're seeing in the market as well. So I'll just close that and get back to the presentation. So the next thing we wanted to talk about is the different approaches that firms are taking to COVID, and I'm not going to go through this in detail. I suppose I should have mentioned that we are going to provide the slides afterwards, so don't feel like you need to take notes on this particular slide. We will provide these afterwards. So I just wanted to start by thanking Lauren, who spent some time putting this together for this presentation. So thank you, Lauren. But it also just shows that every firm is taking a different approach. I won't go through everything in detail, but I'll pull out some of the key points. Just, I suppose, bear in mind that this is publicly available information, so we've just used what firms have announced. But also, there are firms not listed here, and the reason why they're not listed is because they haven't made any public announcements. Just some key points. So salary freezes across most firms, as we've said, hiring freezes, but then also salary freezes as well. And most firms are asking people to have these in place for 3 months. We're not sure if 3 months is just a magic number, if it's a quarter, or whatever the reason for 3 months being, but it just allows firms to have a bit of time to assess the situation and see how things are going. Most firms are asking staff to take leave or reduced hours, whether that's 4 days a week or reducing by 20%. Most firms have asked partners to reduce their partner drawings as well as a way to keep capital in a business just in case. A lot of these are precautionary measures. And just an interesting point is that HSF is the only firm actually to announce that they're paying bonuses for those who qualify. So that's a positive announcement. As I said, these are cautious measures that firms are making. We don't know how long they'll be in place for. We don't know what the full weight of COVID is going to show in the market. But we do think that the full flows of COVID won't be felt until later in the year. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if firms continue with these approaches. But we thought it was just a good summary, just so you can see what's out there in the market and maybe adjust any expectations that you have, and just realise that actually we're all in this together, and it is a market-wide caution approach that every firm is taking. So I'll now pass over to Charles, who's going to go through performance review discussions and how we can start thinking about those.
Sure, thanks, Vicky. Just another poll to throw out there, and this is again just to, I suppose, really test sentiment amongst the audience. And I must stress that this poll is, as Vicky said at the start, completely anonymous, but we're just keen to gauge who'll be looking for a new role internally or externally over the next 6 months, and also just to get a feel for where their market uncertainty is actually going to affect people's decision around that. So if you could please cast your opinions now, that would be great. Let's give that a couple of seconds.
All right, I'll stop that now, Charles, and I'll share the results.
Okay, so a real mix there. That's good, and I think that actually the fact that quite a lot of people are actually happy in their current role, I think makes the point around the framework that we're going to discuss in relation to performance reviews probably even more important. So given that people are happy in their current firm, the framework that we're going to provide you with will really help in terms of solidifying your position internally. But for those who are going to be looking for a new role internally or externally, I think actually looking internally is probably, we always encourage people to look at that as their primary objective. So rather than taking the risk of, if you like the firm that you're in and you have good relationships with the partners, but it's simply a case of wanting to further your career, have an open discussion with your line manager about how to do that. So we're going to run through a recommended approach in terms of your approaching your performance review discussion. So to break that down into, I suppose, three sections. So first of all, defining your objectives, then looking at the conversation itself, and then putting together an action plan. And the action plan runs from prior to going into the discussion and then actually following on from that as well. So one of the most important things to consider ahead of the performance review is your objectives. So we're going to cast another poll. I said it's going to be an interactive discussion. We're just keen to understand what people's objectives actually are, and then we're going to go into those objectives in a little bit more depth as to what the different options could be, and perhaps provide you with some thoughts in terms of defining what your objectives are. They could be a promotion, a salary increase, a bonus, looking at taking on greater responsibilities, looking at skills gaps, further training. It might be non-monetary rewards and recognition that can come in a variety of forms, which Vicky will highlight to you and talk you through, or it might be something else. So Vicky will just set the poll now, and we're keen to get you your top 2 performance review objectives. Okay, just wait for the results.
All right, I'll end that now and share results. There we go.
Okay, interesting. Very interesting. This is, to a certain extent, what we anticipated. It would be, we're not going to be able to get the breakdown of I suppose, the different levels of people that have suggested promotion and salary increase, but it's also interesting to look at the new skill sets, greater responsibilities, and that non-monetary rewards and recognition are actually only at 17%. So I suppose one of the real value adds that we can hopefully provide you during this discussion is to say that getting a promotion and a salary increase in the current time is going to be extremely difficult. So it's really important to recognise that your line manager's hands are probably tied at the moment. And going into, and this is particularly applicable to Gen Y people, so people at coordinator, exec, advisor level, going into a performance review, and hoping for or asking for a salary increase or a promotion or a bonus, it may come across that you, to be frank, that you've got your head in the sand, given what's happening in the current market. It will be very difficult to achieve that. Promotion and salary increases and bonuses are the typical objectives that people quite often have. So our recommendation is to try and, if you're offered those, fantastic, but perhaps going on the front foot by thinking about what else might appeal over the short term. It may be that you could look at salary increase or promotion over the medium term. So other objectives that you could potentially consider, given that, as I say, in 9 out of 10 cases, a salary review and promotion really won't be on the table for you, is non-monetary rewards and recognition. So looking at where you can potentially develop new skills and identifying new areas for improvement, but other non-monetary rewards and recognition, which Vicky will run you through. A key thing that I will talk about there in terms of the salary review process and promotions is that can be done mid-year. So you can potentially look at having a conversation around, well, what can I actually do to achieve a salary increase or a promotion later on in the year? But given that a lot of you put promotion salary increases your primary objectives, we just really want to break down, well, look, we don't recommend that you go into your conversations with that in mind. And that's based on research that we've done, having spoken to lots of our clients. So we're going to move on to looking at other objectives that you can potentially look at this time around, and then potentially looking at non-monetary, salary increases and promotions mid-year.
Thanks, Charles. So as Charles said, there are some other things other than financial rewards that are important. So let's go through some of them now. I won't go through everything listed here, but these are some non-monetary rewards and recognition that we have identified after speaking with lots of people, after speaking with clients, candidates. These are some things that are really important to people. So when you're going into your performance review and maybe salary, promotion, bonus is off the table for good reason at the moment, these are some things that you can consider thinking about. So let's go through just a couple of them. Time off and flexible working. This continues to be important for a lot of people. People want to pursue private projects or spend more time with family and friends or pets and just have a different sort of quality of life. Some people want to move out of the city and only be in the office a couple of days a week. And this sort of working from home has allowed that even more, which is nice. But think about if there are additional flexible work arrangements or any time off that you could potentially look at that might be important to you, that might not be too difficult for your line manager to organise for you. So some things that we've seen are working 4 days in 5. That means that you can spread your hours over a couple of more days and sort of start late or finish early. 9-day fortnights are other things that are quite popular. So think about what's important to you when it comes to time off and flexible working arrangements. And I suppose most firms already have this in place, but it could be something that is important to you now at this particular point in time that you can look at when salary and bonus might be off the table. Study support, financial, and also time off. They're two things that people bring up quite a lot. A lot of people in our industry are very interested in continual learning and looking at ways to improve their skill sets. So thinking about what would be important to you, if there is something that's very specific about your role or a skill gap that you want to improve on, or it could be that you have a personal passion in something completely different, but you'd love some time off just to dedicate to it. So think about what that would look like and go to your manager with some options and say, look, this is really important to me. This is what would help me. I still want to get my job done as best as I can, and I don't want to neglect the business, but this is what I think would help benefit me and the business at the same time. Involvement in other projects. Particularly at, I suppose, the coordinator, advisor and junior manager level when you're looking to grow your skill set. This is a really, I suppose, important one. And it doesn't cost the business really anything, to be honest. It's a matter of moving you around into different teams, having exposure to different clients, practice groups or sectors so that you are growing your knowledge and developing your knowledge, because That's what's going to help you in the future. That's what's going to help you get promoted. And it also just opens a lot more doors. So if there are options to get involved in a different type of project where you are networking with different partners, or you're learning about a new area, or you're working on a firm-wide project that gives you exposure right across the business, those types of projects are really important, and it's a key achievement for you that you can then put on your CV, you can talk to in your performance review, and it will also help create other opportunities for you down the track. So I highly recommend thinking about that one and putting your hand up to say that you are open to them. Secondments is another really good one, both into other teams, but also to clients. The secondments might be a little bit difficult. It depends on the firm, it depends on the clients, it depends on the opportunities. But definitely internal secondments should be available depending on the timing and what's happening within the team. So if somebody's going on maternity leave or parental leave, or if somebody's taking some time off, a leave of absence, any types of opportunities like that where you can step into a new role for a couple of months, try it out, learn a new skill, learn a new area, work with different partners, that will definitely open up some more doors and also keep you learning and growing and developing as well. I will say that one of my personal highlights in my career was going on secondment when I was at Allen Overy, and I was there for almost a year and a half overseas, and it was brilliant. I made some great contacts, I learned so many new skills, and it really was one of my career highlights. So I would recommend definitely putting your hand up for that if it's something that you're interested in. And just a final point on that, one of the, it's not too difficult to achieve, but just tangible recognition for exceptional performance. Just saying thank you to people, sending a quick email, sending a note to partners, recognising somebody who has gone above and beyond. Those small tokens and gestures actually go a long way to keep people engaged, keep people motivated. So anything that is simple, like some movie tickets or a fruit box or a half a day off, or even just a simple thank you in an email or a card, those things actually go a long way, and people really respond to that tangible recognition. So again, think about some of these non-monetary rewards. There's quite a lot here. There are definitely more. This isn't an exhaustive list, but speak with your line manager if any of these are of particular interest. Of course, be realistic. Be cognizant of the market, understand where your line manager's hands are tied, and just work with the business because everybody's trying to achieve the best outcome here. So I will just jump into another quick poll because we do want this session to be interactive, but just to get a feel for what is important to people and what of those non-monetary benefits are important to you. Let's go through a quick poll. So please select your top three. You can choose multiple here, but select your top three, please, just so we can see what's important to people. I'll give that a couple more minutes. Oh, sorry, not minutes, seconds. A couple more seconds. That's quite across the board, which is good. So I'll leave it maybe 3 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Maybe a couple more. People are still voting. All right, I'll stop that now and I'll share the results with everybody. So greater flexibility has 31%. That's quite important for lots of people. Greater role responsibilities, which actually comes back into the key objectives that I've touched on as well. A lot of people are looking for greater role responsibilities. Secondments is high, career development and coaching, well-being benefits, absolutely. So, yeah, interesting. Thank you, everybody, for casting your votes on that. I think that's quite valuable for everyone to see. So just moving on to the actual conversation, the second part in the framework. So we've really broken this down into 3 parts just to make it easy for everyone to follow and easy for you to prepare. So the first part is definitely preparation. So thinking about those objectives and also thinking about your key achievements over the past 12 months. What have you excelled in? Where have you gone above and beyond? And think about some of those areas where you've excelled, but also areas where you can improve as well. Maybe pinpoint some specific areas that you could have done better in a project or an initiative, and think about how you could have made that better. Be curious and think about some intelligent questions. So obviously the market is a bit uncertain at the moment, and talking to your line manager about have the team objectives changed? Has the vision changed? What is the future for this particular team or practice group or client? And start thinking about broader market, I suppose, what's happening in the broader market rather than just you and your individual performance, because thinking about what's happening more broadly, you can then think about how you can add value and how you can grow into those areas. The 360-degree feedback is something that most firms actually have that in place already. So definitely do it. Definitely seek feedback from your colleagues and peers. And I will encourage you to seek feedback on specific projects. So think about a time where you worked with somebody on a specific project and ask for specific feedback on that, because it will be more constructive and it'll allow you to have a base to grow from as well. So moving on from preparation, the actual performance review discussion itself, it will be then initially looking back on your performance. So again, going over your key achievements, looking at where you've gone above and beyond, looking at areas of improvement and any skills gaps, and also listening to your line manager's feedback on you, because they have taken time to gather feedback, to think about it, and it's really important for you to sit down and listen and be cognizant of what they're saying, and also look at how you can improve on anything that they've given you. So definitely look at that self-performance as an opportunity for growth and development, as well as an opportunity for you to highlight where you've excelled and where you've gone above and beyond. And then looking forward will be probably the final stage of the conversation. So look at how you're going to bridge those skills gaps and any areas of improvement. What are any of the new objectives or new KPIs for you in your role and for your team? Because that may have changed given what's happened in the market. There might be different partner expectations, different client expectations, and you might need to work differently, or you might need to think about some other things to focus on in your particular role for the next 6 to 12 months. An action plan, which Charles will actually go through in a little bit more detail and give you some practical things on that. And the other elements, and Charles did touch on this before as well, but the salary increase, bonus, promotion, while they might not be on the table right now, it doesn't mean that they might not be on the table in 6 months or 12 months. So definitely talk to your line manager, lock in a mid-year review, and see if this is something that can be revisited down the line. And also, of course, think about those non-monetary benefits, what's important to you, and have an open discussion with your line manager about them. And again, be realistic. Don't expect too much from your line manager or from the firm as well. And just, I suppose, work with your line manager and listen and understand where the business is coming from as well. So, final poll for today. We just want to get people's thoughts on how you actually do prepare for your performance review, because everybody prepares differently. Some people prepare, some people don't. But do you, I suppose, consult with colleagues, refer to salary guides, consult with a mentor, consult with specialist recruiters, such as Charles, myself, Lauren? What do you do to prepare? Start with colleagues. Give that a couple more seconds. All right, I will stop that now and show the results. So most people consult with colleagues, consult with a mentor, and refer to salary guides. And some of you speak with specialist recruiters. Charles and I are available, and Lauren's available if you did want to talk to any of us about your career or performance review discussion. But also in terms of salary guide and data, we do have our salary guide on our website, and we publish that every year. So feel free to access that. But consulting with colleagues and consulting with a mentor are definitely some things that you should be doing ahead of your performance review. Absolutely. So it's good to see that that's happening. So I will now pass it over to Charles, who's going to talk you through the action plan before we then move across to some takeaway tips.
Great, thank you, Vicky. And the action plan and the takeaway tips there'll be an element of blending the two together. But I suppose key takeaways, I'm just conscious of time, so I won't talk for too long, but short-term objectives, absolutely the number one thing to think about. And I suppose just take from this discussion our advice around, particularly for the next 6 months, it's going to be very, very difficult to achieve promotion or salary increase. So perhaps really find your short-term objectives and think about what those are actually going to be, which would include potentially non-monetary incentives that we've discussed today in terms of career development, coaching, etc. Look at and also think about, well, what are your long-term objectives, medium-term objectives, and how might that career development and training feed into those? Understanding what your worth is, and that's in the form of looking at salary guides, consulting with peers in the industry, consulting with people such as ourselves to understand what is your worth from a salary perspective, medium term, perhaps in mid-year review, but also looking at your job description and how far you're satisfying the requirements of that job description, to understand that this is particularly for more junior candidates or individuals within firms. Well, okay, am I worth X simply because I've been with a firm for 6 to 12 months? Or am I worth Y because I've gone over and above my job description? So that's something to really consider, I think. Booking in a mid-year review is absolutely essential. And also having over-communicating with your line managers, just checking in to find out how you're performing. What's the focus of your role? What is the focus of your role given the evolving environment, the rapidly evolving environment? Have your KPIs changed? Are you achieving your KPIs? Keep your CV updated, not necessarily your CV, but just keep a note of what you've been doing that's good. What's satisfying the criteria of your role, but also what are you adding in terms of value? And the final point is build your network within the firm, externally, and that's not necessarily putting yourself on the market, but just building your understanding of what's happening in other firms, and just building your understanding of how to continue progressing your career. So some key takeaway tips for you. Appreciate the current climate. Don't go to your line manager expecting a salary increase this time around. Your time will come. Keep your head down. Keep in contact, close communication with your line manager. Focus on achieving non-monetary benefits and incentives this time around, and look for a mid-year review. So get that booked in the diary. Build your network, that's absolutely crucial, and continue to engage with the key stakeholders. For more senior advisors and above, that might be partners. That insulates yourself in case the market turns down, but also it means that you're ready to be promoted or whatever it may be as the market picks up in front of partners. If you're more junior than that and your key stakeholders are more senior BD people, make sure that you're engaging with those people as well. Continue to document your key achievements and where you're adding value. And an absolute key takeaway is, even if things get worse, remain positive. Do not be toxic, because that will affect your reputation within the firm. But also, it's a very, very small market. Sydney is the smallest market the biggest market in Asia Pac, and that's a small market. Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, Hong Kong, Singapore are even smaller. So do not be toxic, remain positive, and that will benefit you long term. So that's enough from us. We'd be really keen. Hopefully you found that insightful and helpful. We'd like to throw open the floor to questions, and we'll be happy to answer those.
Thanks, Charles and Vicky. And just to let everyone know again, the text box in the Q&A mode is open. So any questions that you've got, please send them through, and you can send them privately to me as well. We've had a couple of questions, Charles and Vicky. Just with regards, firstly, the stats you showed, I think you mentioned that Lauren pushed them together around what's happening in each of the firms. Can you just confirm, is that from an Australian perspective? That's what? Is that a global perspective? Is it an APAC perspective?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to answer that. It's from Australian press, but we did check that with global firms, this actually is in place with global firms as well. So it's actually a bit of both, if that helps.
Perfect. Secondary question to that one was, what's your view of through the conversations you've maybe had with CMOs, and I'm happy to give a view here as well, around how long those measures will be kept in place?
There's no real definitive, as most people are saying, until for 3 months. That 3 month mark was definitely something that comes in. We were being a bit pessimistic and thinking that things might drag on for a bit longer than expected, but actually what we're seeing is positivity come back into the market quite quickly, and people are even talking about being back into the office maybe next week, beginning of June, some in July, and so we then might start seeing these measures ease in the new financial year potentially.
Yeah. I think
yeah.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, Vicky. A key point from my perspective is that I think a lot will depend on whether freezes are implemented from the UK or US, or whether they're in Australia. I think that will be a critical factor. From speaking with a range of our different clients, some firms, or some of these measures are, they're not sort of formal lockdowns as such in terms of recruitment, and I think that it's going to be more sort of a wait and see type approach, essentially. So I think, you know, with this situation, it's not a typical downturn, and you know, we were speaking to some firms were thinking, well, it's going to be next year, it's going to be October, and there were some firms that were far more pessimistic than sort of 3 or 4 weeks ago than they are now. So we've been very conservative in saying that perhaps that'll be August, September, October before activity improves. But I'm speaking with someone yesterday who's saying that they actually think it'll be July when recruitment activity picks up, and these sorts of the tightening of salaries, etc., actually lift. So it's difficult to say in summary, and I think it will depend on the factors I've just listed above.
I think, yeah, it's a hard one to call this one. I have a very distinct view. I think, and it's sometimes not what people want to hear, but I think there's the COVID crisis that has happened, and that's one thing, and we're starting to see the easing of social measures within that. But there's another crisis coming, which is the recession crisis. So I wonder, depending on how it goes, and that's the big question, I wonder if we will see some of these measures continue past July as try to protect people's roles going forward, because I think that is a common theme I'm seeing across professional services, that the people are trying to protect, firms are trying to protect roles here, and the longer that they can make these savings, I guess, and the more chance they've got of saving these roles as we go into a recession in the region, would be my view. Another couple of questions. Sorry, coming back to the advice on having your conversations. In your experience, what is the most achievable non-monetary benefit to negotiate? Good question.
Very good. So, and just, can you see is my screen being shared?
Yes.
It is great. Okay. And I was noting down when in the survey there were people mentioned flexibility, time off, flexible working, etc. The most achievable one, I think, these days, and then I've seen evolve over the last few years, is having flexibility. So being able to work from home a day a week or 2 days a week. And in particular, given that now firms have become a lot more agile, given what's happened, and given that people are set up to work from home, it's almost, dare I say it, I suppose, a non-monetary benefit that has actually now just become part of everyone's working, everyday sort of everyday life. One thing that I've noticed that's come about more recently that's very achievable, and this is people that don't have children, is a 9-day fortnight. That's something that is achievable, provided that the individual is able to demonstrate that they are highly capable of delivering the requirements of their role in 9 days a fortnight, but also that they're contactable on that additional day. So, some people can actually take, shave 10% off the salary and achieve that. But others, if they've been working within a firm for a while, they can cut down to 9 days a fortnight, achieve a full salary, but they have to have been demonstrating that they can fulfil the requirements of the role and also be available for calls on that additional day. The secondary one would be additional study support. And potentially some additional annual leave. Those are the key things I think are the most achievable. And Vicky, do you have any further comments on that?
Yes, thanks, Charles. So I was going to say the same thing, but also the other one is getting involved in other projects or greater responsibilities, particularly at a time like this where there are hiring freezes, but there may be gaps in the team. And so there might already be a role that somebody isn't doing or somebody is overloaded in doing 2 roles, and you might be able to pick that up or be able to assist in a project that might be quite novel to the business because of COVID and be able to work with HR, for example. So I would expect that there would be different types of projects that people can get involved in right now, and think about what they are, think about how important they are into the business, and just put your hand up. You can only ask the question. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But those types of, I suppose, projects won't cost the business anything for you to get involved. I suppose it is difficult when there is a cost attached to it, particularly, for example, the wellbeing, the gym, the healthcare. There is a cost associated with that, and usually those sorts of initiatives are firm-wide, and so it's not just an individual ad hoc initiative. It's definitely across the board, and so those types of initiatives are a little bit more difficult. But if it is something that is quite specific, quite individual, something that doesn't cost the firm a lot of money, or that doesn't come out of a specific hiring salary budget, it might be a lot easier for you to get that across the line. I hope that helps.
I couldn't agree more. I think during these times, and I've been through a few crises in my time through my years, but getting involvement in other projects, teams become more fluid through crisis. You don't necessarily sit within the team and within the structure that you're currently in. You can cross over, whether you're a marketer going into digital, whether you're a marketer going into BD or vice versa. There's an opportunity to get involved, and with that comes the opportunity to have greater role responsibilities. Mm-hmm. So while the financial reward might not be there immediately, you're sticking your head up, quite frankly, for the future. And it's especially, if you're in larger teams, it's a great time to do that. So if you're willing to be really proactive and stretch at this time, it's a great time to do it and get yourself noticed, quite frankly.
Absolutely. And
sorry, Charles.
That's all right. I was going to say one final point for me is that the worst that your employer can say is no. Provided that I'm not suggesting that you go to your employer and say, I want X, Y, Z over and above what's reasonable. I'm not suggesting that. But if you go to your employer with a credible suggestion such as, I'd like to perhaps do a digital course for these reasons, and this is how much it will cost, and this will be the benefits to the business and my career development. If it's a credible request, then it might be that your line manager says, look, that's a great idea. We can't do it at this particular time, but great idea. So I think it's definitely worth making those sorts of suggestions. And also this comes around to back to my point around being open and honest and upfront with your line manager. So one of the things that we hear sometimes is when someone goes to resign and the line manager has absolutely no, it's a surprise. It should never be a surprise to the firm that you're working at that you're looking to resign. We'd always encourage you to have that open discussion and to seek the opportunity to progress within the firm that you're in. And this is now the time to actually do that when there isn't hiring in the external market. We don't have external hires driving salary increases. Engage in open dialogue with your employer, and that will actually benefit you and your employer and your own personal brand in the market.
Yeah, good point. Good point. And just the other piece as well around the flexibility you mentioned. I know you and I have had this conversation before, but the flexibility is here to stay now. We will not go back to our old way of working. That's just a fact. So the opportunity, I think, is fantastic news. Personally, it's something that I thought was going to take 3-4 years is now with us already. So I think it's great for everyone. I think productivity goes up at this time in many places. So now is a great time to talk about what flexibility means for you as individuals. And everybody's got different circumstances, but great time to have that conversation. Okay, last question. Any suggestions for how to manage expectations of junior people? And I wouldn't say it's just junior in this question regarding promotions, salary increase during this time.
Can I ask, is that from a head of, or is it an anonymous question?
I think it's anonymous, but I think it's, I would assume by the question it's someone who's at least a line manager.
Sure. I suppose, Vicky, I think both you and I can answer this from different perspectives. Vicky's been a line manager herself, and I've worked with a lot of line managers before. Conscious of time, so very quickly, I think and this is to heads of, but also to more junior candidates as well, essentially giving junior individuals an understanding of the fact that their time will come, as I've said before, but also that expectations for juniors, really it's a case of, well, you've got to be patient and appreciate that although people at that sort of stage in their lives and career, they want things really quickly, it takes a while. And in order to achieve what you're looking to get from a career development perspective, you need to wait, you need to get the groundwork done in terms of building up your core skills, you need to build relationships, you need to also be mindful of what's happening in the external environment. There are pressures, both financial and also commercially in terms on partners, on firms, and just to be patient. And also to remind them that the external market isn't moving. So to just bunker down and work with the firm, the line manager, and just be patient, and let's see what happens next calendar year. It's quite a long-winded answer, but Vicky, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Charles. And I agree with all of that. I suppose just a personal flashback when I was working through the GFC when I was at Clayton Youth, and I was told you're lucky to have a job, which I know a lot of people are receiving that message at the moment, and it's absolutely true. And at the time, I suppose I was younger. I was like, oh, okay, you're lucky to have a job, but it's true. And I kept my head down and I just focused on delivering and performing and building my network and trying to upskill as much as I can. And I think by giving people, or particularly junior candidates, examples of where they can be adding value and how their career can, their path can progress after this, showing what that career path looks like, I actually think is quite important. And say, look, whilst your salary might not change now, this is what we can look to in the future. These are some other examples across the team or in other businesses of where people have progressed and how they've been able to do that. And growing your skills, working in different projects, working with different teams allows you to then have a salary increase far greater down the line, but also allows you to progress a lot quicker. So giving people that option and showing them what that career path looks like. I suppose the other thing is just being really, really honest with them and say, look, good luck going externally and finding something. The grass isn't always greener. And we say that to people. It's not always greener. Looking externally for $5,000, $10,000 extra, it might not be worth it. If you're happy in your role, if you like the firm, the team, the culture, then why change that just for the sake of a couple of $1,000s? So it's really understanding what their actual drivers are and motives are for that salary increase. Is it for just a simple title? Maybe some people want that actual title change now but are happy with the salary to be reflected later down the line. It depends on what that individual person's drivers are. So I think, as I said before, just be honest, work on that actual career plan with them so that they can see what that path is within the business, and talk to them about realistically what's happening in the market as well. So that would be my tips. So that helps.
Just a final point from me on that, just further to Vicky's comments around titles, etc. Quite often, junior candidates will come to us and say, for example, people that say advisor level and they want to be a manager. And one thing that we'll have candidates come to us and say, well, have you actually spoken to your line manager about what the progression to manager looks like? So just back to the original question, how do you manage expectations? Well, it could be around, well, actually, this is what a manager role looks like in our firm. In other firms, you might get a manager title, but it may well be that it's simply a title, but the type of work that you're doing isn't any different. It's not more senior. So I'd say a lot of people will come to us and we actually say, well, look, here's some advice, but actually go back to the firm that you're currently in, because, as Vicky said, the grass isn't always greener, and talk to your firm about a career development plan, work with your line manager. So for more junior candidates, in terms of your expectations, don't necessarily see a title and a few $1,000s difference as being grass being greener. In terms of being a line manager, to manage expectations, assess what those expectations really are, dig down to find out, well, are those expectations realistic, but also what can we do in terms of putting together a career development plan? And they will be after 12 months, you say, right, okay, now it's time for you to go and explore another opportunity. Or it may well be that you can put some steps in place to involve that person in different projects, or to maybe tweak and refine their role. So it's a case of having very upfront, open, honest dialogue and talking about what those expectations are, assessing whether they're realistic, and then if they are realistic, putting some steps in place to make that individual feel like they've had some sort of progression.
Yeah, good points. I'd always just remind people as well that performance conversations are two-way. So, one of my biggest bugbears for my career is when I've been holding these is people not coming prepared for those meetings. And that goes both ways. That goes with you as conducting them or you as participating. So, being really prepared to have an honest two-way conversation is, and I've heard that quite through this presentation today, is so important, and will lead to more progressive conversations quicker. Time's up. Great session, Charles and Vicky. Thank you so much for sharing the time and sharing your insights. Thanks to everyone for attending as well. Just a quick reminder, next webinar next week is on the art, science of persuasion and the foundations of killer copywriting. I know that's again very pertinent at this time as we become more comms heavy within our firm. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that one. We also have an ICON masterclass next week on crisis management, crisis communication. So if you're interested, please have a look at that one too. And just a reminder, our sort of more informal coffee catch-up has moved to Fridays every fortnight now. The next one will be this coming Friday. So if you wanted to have a more social chat, chew the fat, please come along to that. But thanks everyone for attending. Keep well, keep safe. And I look forward to seeing you all. Thanks again, Charles and Vicky.